Good afternoon. I'm Eric Baskin from the School of Social Science, and I'd like to welcome you to this year's Leon Levy Lecture. Many of you know that Leon Levy was a legendary investor and philanthropist, founder of Oppenheimer Mutual Funds, benefactor of many causes, including Bard College, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the New York Botanical Garden, Rockefeller University, and of course the Institute for Advanced Study, where he was president of the Board of Trustees for many years and a major force behind the growth of the Institute's endowment. When deciding where to invest, Leon didn't pay too much attention to matters like earnings or dividends, stock analyst reports. What interested him was the psychological dynamic of investment, the intersection of the stock market, economics, and psychology. And this approach led him to be something of a contrarian. He would sell when all his colleagues were buying. Here's what he said about the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s. The collective madness that seized people in the 90s provides persuasive evidence of the rule of psychology in markets. Even the most sophisticated investors willingly suspended their sense of disbelief, and perhaps even more astonishing, dismissed facts and figures, staring them in the face. Doesn't that sound a little too familiar? Of course, when Leon saw these other investors behaving this way, he promptly sold all his technology stocks comfortably before they lost 95% of their value. And it's painful to think now how we might be doing if we had him around this time. Well, just as Leon Levy used his eclectic scholarship to good effect, so has our speaker this evening, Barry O'Neill. Barry got a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Michigan. He then got a PhD in psychology from Michigan. And after various teaching positions at Northwestern, Yale, and Stanford, he's now a professor of political science at UCLA, and also this year's Leon Levy member here in the School of Social Science. Barry is well known for his deep and original analysis of international relations from a game theoretic point of view. This is what Tom Schelling, who won the 2005 Nobel Prize for his own work on the strategy of war and peace, had to say about Barry's book, Honor, Symbols, and War. This is a creative application of a highly original theory to a subject whose immense importance is suggested by the title. It opens a new approach to a subject that is at the center of international politics. O'Neill is to be congratulated and read. Well, today we can do better than just reading Barry O'Neill. We can actually listen to him. So, without further ado, Barry O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Eric. And you could always buy the book too. Well, you did. That's right. So you did. I can't complain. So thank you for asking me to speak, and for that matter, thanks especially to the Leon Levy Foundation for having me. This wonderful place, and it's going to be tough. You know, it's going to be tough to leave the place and to leave the people, the colleagues that I've met here. That's just how it is. That's life. But I'll carry the spirit with me when I'm back in front of large classes and endless committees. My topic is honor, and I want to say fast that I don't mean the word in some general sense. I mean it in a very narrow sense, the kind that anthropologists often use. It's got to do with sensitivity to insults and a response of vengeance, and I'll try to explicate that idea in my talk. And it seems a little odd. I'll talk about things, especially things that have happened since the publication of my book on the subject, which partly on the subject at least. And it seems kind of archaic to talk about this in the context of international relations, because national honor, I don't know how many people have seen Duck Soup with the four Marx Brothers, and Groucho, the Fredoni ambassador, wanders around and insults the other ambassador and gets insulted, and this means war. And so this is a parody of the American view of the European way of doing things, and now it's passé in Europe too, at least so people claim. In my view, the pattern of honor response to challenges and violence is still there, even though the word is gone. People, leaders in particular, tend to project their social customs, what happens within their country, what they learned in the playground, what they learned from their parents. They project them up into the international sphere, and so we should study those in order to understand international relations. Not an uncontroversial position, but one that I believe in. So I'm going to make this claim that the pattern of honor is with us still and explains much international dealings, especially much American behavior. And a second claim is a lot easier, that for many other groups throughout the world are also influenced by the culture of honor. And leaders, American leaders in particular, should understand this, or there's going to be more trouble. My first task will be to describe the essence of honor in this special sense, and for that purpose I'll talk about something which I see as the quintessential expression of honor in many Western countries, that is dueling. And probably the most famous duel is probably the most famous historical event in New Jersey. It's the duel between Hamilton and Burr. Across the Hudson from New York, July of 1804, two very eminent people, either by birth or by their accomplishment. Burr was the grandson of the Reverend Jonathan Edwards, the Congregationalist theologian, and the son of the second president of Princeton. And at the time of the duel, of course, he was the vice president of the United States. Hamilton was an author of the Federalist Papers and a founding father and a former secretary of the Treasury. Now, there's a concept, which I don't know if it's named that, but the concept of a perfect duel. The antagonists exchange fire. Maybe they wound, maybe they don't wound, but they don't kill each other. And having faced death, and having seen the other fellow face death, the conflict is now settled, the matter is now settled, each is satisfied as to the other's honor. One example was a duel between two British noblemen, where they both shot simultaneously, and before they went round again, one apologized. He said that he would have apologized earlier because he felt he had been wrong to insult the other fellow, but he was afraid of being called a coward. And so in the prototypical perfect duel, it ends with shaking hands. And in fact, you might call a duel a kind of conflict resolution mechanism. I mean, what would the alternative be? The alternative would be to gather people on your side, to have large-scale fights, perhaps assassinations, for the matter to extend on through time as well as through your social group. But a duel ends it. The notion of satisfaction from a duel terminates it. And so that's the perfect duel. But this was not a perfect duel by any means, and it went a fair ways off the script. And I think the fact that it went off the script is an indication. It exposes certain aspects of dueling which would not otherwise be exposed. 3 weeks earlier, an article had appeared in the Albany Register relevant to the New York governor's campaign. A fellow who had been at a private meeting had heard Hamilton say certain things, and he reported them in the article. And I personally think he was the one that should have been shot. Hamilton had evidently called Burr a dangerous man not to be trusted with the reins of government. And this article from the Albany Register came into Burr's hands. Now, to call somebody a dangerous man and perhaps incompetent is not an offense against your honor. An offense against your honor is you do not deserve the reputation of a gentleman. Your pretension to that rank is false. To call you incompetent or dangerous it's an insult, but it's not a point of honor. And in fact, Hamilton had himself almost dueled with President Monroe. And the point of the duel was Monroe had questioned his honesty as Secretary of the Treasury. The suggestion was that he might have been paying bribes. And so Hamilton published a pamphlet saying it wasn't a bribe. I was having an affair with this fellow's wife, and he was blackmailing me. And that's why I'm innocent of this point of honor. Ironically, it was Aaron Burr that helped effect a settlement between the two of them. So this dangerous man comment was not duelable. But the fellow, the writer in the Albany Register, went on a bit further, and he said he could detail, quote, a still more despicable opinion which General Hamilton has expressed of Mr. Burr. And Burr wrote to Hamilton demanding an explanation. And so this also is a problem, because if you say the first accusation was under the threshold and the second accusation was above the first, does that mean the second accusation was above the threshold? Of course not. And so what is Hamilton going to do at this point? I mean, the accusation has not been named. Is he going to go through all the things, all the negative opinions he said in private or in public about Burr? Is he going to apologize for each and say, is that it? Do you accept for this? Well, try this. I said this about you, you see. And so this is a very difficult, I would say the rules of dueling, either they should have recognized that it was not duelable, or they should have taken it to a court, as you could have done in Italy in the 16th century, but there was no such thing in the United States. Perhaps the seconds, the people chosen to put, in whose hands you put your honor, most of the time they succeeded in solving these things. Perhaps an acknowledgement, an apology, an expression of respect for the other person as a gentleman. In this case, I think there was more to it than the words. There was politics behind it all. They really wanted to eliminate the other person in some, at least in a political way. And so the night before the duel, Hamilton wrote what he called a statement on the impending duel of Aaron Burr, and he explained his logic. He was morally opposed to dueling. He was religiously opposed to it. He lost his son on the very same grounds, the very same dueling grounds 3 years before. The whole affair was illegal, as it was almost everywhere dueling occurred. It was against all this. But he said he had to be useful in the future to society, and that conformity, in his words, conformity to public prejudice, in this particular, forced him to take up Burr's challenge. And what he was going to do, he was going to hold his first shot. He would let Burr shoot at him. And he hadn't yet decided whether to hold a second shot or shoot directly at Burr. And it wasn't clear whether he in fact did this. Many of the accompanying party turned their backs at the occasion of the duel for the sake of legal protection, so they wouldn't witness this act. Clear what Hamilton really did, but we know there was no second shot. He was taken back to New York, and he died the next day. And so the question becomes, what sense can we make of somebody who abhors dueling, and instead of saying, look, I'm an anti-duelist, I've said this often, he engages in it, but he doesn't really engage in it. He does this. Why not just decline if you're going to do that? And so this is really the puzzle. So I'll make some general remarks about dueling, and it's not the only manifestation of honor. In fact, many cultures of honor have no dueling whatsoever. Many Islamic cultures or Roman or Greek cultures, there was no dueling there. But it does illustrate one aspect of the culture of honor. So I'll say a bit more about it and then address it in a more theoretical way. It started in Italy in the 16th century in a form of test of honor, rather than say truth of the accusation. But then it died out there in the 17th century. But it had spread to France, England, Ireland, Germany, Poland, then to Russia, Latin America, and it was revived in Italy, probably due to the presence of French troops in the 1800s. There's a long list of people who were involved in these affairs. Stephen Decatur, the naval hero, died in a duel, of course, and Alexander Pushkin died in a duel over his wife's love affair with another man. Button Gwinnett, who signed the Declaration of Independence, died in a duel, and I'm sure that the mathematicians here know Émile Galois died in a duel, scribbling notes all night, basic material on the solvability of equations, age 20. President Jackson shot his opponent dead, basically point blank. The playwright Ben Jonson, the Irish liberator Daniel O'Connell shot his opponent and was tormented by it for the rest of his life. He offered money to support the man's family. Four British prime ministers fought. William Pitt the Younger did so while he was still in office. Mussolini fought 5 times at least. He claimed he fought 12 in ways that forwarded his career. Edouard Manet dueled with an art critic. And in 1967, the mayor of Marseille, who was a socialist, fought a fencing duel with a Gaullist deputy. And you can go on YouTube if you want to see the duel. You can tune into YouTube and watch them duel. And now, to understand the rationality of social institutions, many turn to Max Weber. But in this case, he's too involved because he issued a challenge to a young scholar to a saber duel. And he seemed quite serious about it over allegations that he was financially dishonest. And so my point is that somehow it's a widespread custom, and it literally spread from one place to another and was in some sense irresistible. Now, first I have to define honor. And I want to define it very carefully. I want it almost like a mathematical definition. I want it to be stand up word by word. General talk about honor that you read page after page and eventually get the idea. That's not what I want to do. I think Roger Myerson has compared that kind of business to a whale gathering krill. And so I want nuggets, okay? Now I'm just wondering, would you like to have, don't hesitate to interrupt, have a seat. Okay, there's chairs here. In my system, there's 2 kinds of honor, personal and public. Personal honor is how much I value 2 certain goals, and my public honor is how much my group sees me as valuing those 2 goals. What are the goals? The goals are the desire to defend myself or my group, or if I can't, to take revenge. And I'm going to claim this is just about everywhere that people reasonably talk of honor. This is kind of a pattern that you see, and it gets expressed in different ways, but many of the expressions follow from these principles. And so what's the other goal? The desire for public honor, meaning not only do I want people to know that I'm ready to defend you or take revenge if you're in my group or my family. Not only do I want that, I want people to know that I want it. It's reflexive, it's circular. Now, let me step back for a sec. It sounds fishy, you know. It's like I've got 1 degree of having 2 goals, and it sounds like I'm equivocating there. Can't I have them both to different degrees? And my answer to this is that the ideology of the group, the common assumption through the group, is that these goals go together. If you have honor in the sense of wanting to defend your group, then you also are proud of it. You want people to know it. You can be virtuous and not care if people know it, but you can't be honorable. You can't say I'm honorable and don't care who knows it. And you know, this is an important thing. I'll give a second example of this. There's a story about a rabbi who would sign his letters, the truly humble one. And so one of his students was challenged. How can he sign his letters, the truly humble one? And the student's answer was that his humility had reached such a pinnacle that he no longer considered it to be a virtue. You see? Fine for humility, but not for honor. If you're honorable, you must, by definition, at least by my definition, be proud of it. Now, why an honor system? To deter your enemies and reassure your friends. And both of these 2 goals work into this. In many situations, if I'm deciding what to do, if I think people will stand with me, I'll stand too. But if I think everyone else will run, so will I. Not only have I to be ready to defend my group, I have to know they'll stand with me. And that's why somebody who keeps their readiness to defend their group a secret is undermining the system. That's why both of those elements have to be in a system of honor. And so here's some of the things that come out of this. having stated those two basics, various things follow from it. One thing is that the boundaries of honor get extended. Not just yourself, your family, but your whole group, maybe your ancestors, maybe your religion and your culture. Why not? I mean, first off, it's in your interest to do so. So if I can include them in the boundary of my honor, I'm happy to do so. Secondly, it's an opportunity for me to demonstrate my honor. I mean, in some sense, which puzzles me very much, honor is precarious. Somebody duels, and then they're called upon to duel again, and they can't say, I already proved my point with the last fellow, you see. And this is puzzling to me, but people talk about masculinity being precarious, and I have a feeling that there's some relationship between dueling, honor being precarious, and masculinity being such. It's tied in with strength, which makes sense, autonomy. A threat to your autonomy. To call somebody a puppy, for example, was a duelable offense. What does it mean? Nothing, except the insinuation is there that he lacks autonomy. And honor is gender identity. Lyndon Johnson had dreams, according to Doris Kearns, right. He had dreams about people approaching him, accusing him of being cowardly and unmanly if he were to withdraw from Vietnam. So it's tightly tied in with gender identity. And so everything here, of course, is the male form of honor, and the female form of honor is quite different. The desire that it be known, risky displays, sometimes which don't even have any defensive purpose. Why should that be? Increased sensitivity to insults, symbolic challenges. In the American South, antebellum, to pull someone's nose, or, of course, in other cultures, to slap their face or slap them with a glove, etc. To say certain verbal formulae, to give them the lie. The boundaries enlarge. The insults can be smaller and smaller. In fact, you can enlarge the boundaries yourself. Honor systems typically support oaths. So one of the reasons Johnson couldn't withdraw from Vietnam was because America had made a commitment in Vietnam. It's a useful, it can, unless you entrap yourself, it can be a useful device to convince other people that you'll fight for more things than otherwise. Now this is an Islamic concept. It's not widely seen in the West, but this notion of hyper-hospitality. You are my guest, and you may be a perfect stranger, but in my house, you are everything. One anthropologist, Charles Lindblom, talked about going to Afghanistan. The host gives you the best food, the best place to sleep. The host walks with you. The host sits with you constantly and talks with you, or sits with you in silence. If you go and live with someone else, there's no challenging, but there is vengeance. If you go and live with someone else, the person has a vendetta against the person who you move to. And he illustrated by a story, which I don't know if it was factual, but it may be probably a story that goes around in the culture, that a Hindu man came and stayed at one fellow's house, and the people in the town were incensed that an infidel should be in their midst. And he assured his guest, he said, "Don't worry, if you are killed, I will avenge your death." So that's the story. That's the Afghanistani story. This goes a little bit further, too. The notion of refuge, the notion of, ideally, if the murderer of your son should show up at your house, you should give him refuge in your house. He's untouchable there. Outside, later, a different story. And so I'll just ask this as a rhetorical question. What does this all have to do? What does such a cultural attitude have to do with American actions in Afghanistan? So I'll just say a few words about how game theory relates to this. I won't say much. I think there are some philosophical implications of game theory for this. This is really a restatement of what I put up 2 slides ago, that as an honorable person, I choose an action A with the highest, I'm facing an array of actions. I choose the highest value of this formula. Here's my personal honor. Here's everybody's estimate of my honor. And here is the degree to which my action will help in the defense or revenge of a wrong to the group. And here's the other extraneous costs of my action, perhaps the risk to me. The notion here is that the more honorable I am, the more I value, these two multiply. The more honorable I am, the more I value the group's estimate of my honor. The more honorable I am, the more I value defending the group. And so, you know, when I talked about these two things occurring in a bundle, these two things occurring together, this is the expression of it, the fact that they occur within the same factor. And many philosophers, starting with Aristotle and many since, have talked about, debated whether honor is social or personal, whether it's held within the person or whether it's everyone looking in. And so, to me, I want to simply divide the word into two, but relate the two halves in this way. It's the personal and the social aspect of honor come together through this formula where the personal gets multiplied, literally multiplied by the social. So that is the formula. And what can you do with something like this? I think you can explain a concept of dueling. I've forgotten what I did in my slides. Yes, I did. Okay, very good. A duel is a pure display of honor in the sense that there's no direct defensive benefit. I had this here in the old version of the formula, but if I set this to 0, if I say dueling does nothing for the group, then I get this. I get the honor times the estimate minus the cost, which is to me the risk. Have a seat. Really? Okay. Minus the risk of dueling. That's if I duel. And if I decline, of course, there's no cost, except the audience, my group, may re-estimate my degree of honor. May or may not. Here's the estimate based on their observation that I duel. This is their estimate of my honor given they saw me duel. This is their estimate of my honor given they saw me decline the duel. And the question is, what will they do? Perhaps, if one child dares another to eat a worm, if they're 5, it's got force. But if they're 15, the other will just laugh because the audience will not revise its estimate of any worthwhile personal trait based on the refusal to eat the worm. Each of these systems is self-consistent. A system where you do duel because the audience will revise their estimate of your honor if you don't, or a system where you don't duel because the audience is simply ignoring the fact that you were challenged in this way. It's the same, for example, as driving on the left side of the road, or should we drive on the right side of the road? There's no rational choice between either of those two, literally equilibria. If everyone drives on the right side or the left side, that's fine. If everyone drives differently, that isn't fine. Now, there's a difference between duel when you're challenged as an equilibrium versus ignore a duel when you're challenged as an equilibrium. This has very unfortunate consequences for the people involved, and this doesn't, okay? Still, they're self-enforcing. Both situations are self-consistent, and that's essentially the concept that John Nash, who sent his regrets for coming today, and John Nash promulgated in his famous Nash equilibrium. Okay, let's see what's next. That's a little ahead. There's a further wrinkle you can put on this, and I'll just mention it. I won't go into detail. If there is a system of challenges, those below a certain level of honor don't duel and have a lowered estimate of their honor. Those above a certain threshold do duel. There's a way you can set up the model in which the most honorable people don't duel after all. And the way you do it is that each person that you meet has some private impression of your honor, okay? And when you're challenged and you're extremely honorable, you better not duel or everyone's impression will go down of your honor. Why would it go down? Each person says to himself, I have a very positive impression of this person by our interaction. Why is he accepting this challenge to duel? What does he have to prove? It must be that someone else, it must be the rest of the people, have a lower impression of this person's honor. He must have been lucky when he dealt with me. Okay, so each person says that. Maybe it's all false, but each person assumes that you're trying to impress everybody else, thus lowering your estimate of their honor. And I think you could say you could see this in life, and it's a little abstruse, it's a little arcane, okay? It sounds like hardcore game theory, but you can see it in places. For example, somebody is accused of something in a political campaign, and they say, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. And if they did respond, people might say, why does he feel he has to respond to that? Okay. Ferrari or Rolls-Royce doesn't advertise. And if they did advertise, we'd probably say, what's gone wrong with Ferrari and Rolls-Royce that now they're advertising? So I don't know if this mechanism is enforced, but it's a possible way that dueling might cease, as it basically has. Okay, so I'm going to go on. Now let's see how I'm doing. Not too badly. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the second half of the talk, and I'll talk about the persistence of honor in the United States by other names, and then I'll say very briefly about honor in other cultures. Now, I think I can see my slides are out of order. There we go. Unfortunately, the first is last. What are some manifestations of honor in the U.S. today, even though people don't call it that? Well, in civil actions in the courts, I think it's true that many people will say explicitly to you that I don't expect, this is not worth it for me. I'm not filing this suit because of dollars and cents. I'm filing it on the principle of the thing. And I know when I worked on our university's grievance committee at UCLA, people were quite explicit about that. They couldn't possibly have hoped to benefit. And Joan was on the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee of the American Association of University Professors. And I think you'd agree with me that many people are fighting for something, but it's not a practical goal, and they even realize it. I'm not saying the United States is any more litigious than it was. I don't believe it is, and I don't think it's much more litigious than a lot of other places. But I think that is certainly a motive. And perhaps it's a good system, too. Perhaps it's good. Perhaps it deters violations of the law, knowing that even if it's not worth it, we'll face possible suits. Honor violence and militarism in the American South and the American West. And what I'm saying here is not anything against Southern culture, because the roots of this militarism are also my roots, the herding societies of Ireland and Scotland and so on. But the claim here is that the American South, and to a lesser degree the American West, have an unusually high murder rate. That if you look, it's not so much reflected in the larger cities, but in the rural parts, the murder rate might be several times, perhaps 3 times, comparable regions in the north. And why? Is it the temperature? I mean, it's true. You know, my friend used to have this expression. My friend who was a policeman used to say, Jack Frost is the best policeman, meaning that when it's cold, people won't come out, and they don't need me. That won't explain it. I mean, in a sense, there's a little lab of the temperature going up and down. There's a little lab you can run. Every year the temperature goes up and down. You can watch crime go up and down, and it does. But it doesn't go up enough to explain this threefold increase. Is it a background of slavery? Doesn't seem to be that either. If you look at the particular parts of the South where there's a strong presence of slaves before the war, and compare them with certain other parts, that simply is not it. Is it, more guns or these explanations have to be dealt with, and they were very expertly dealt with by Richard Nesbitt and Dov Cohen at the University of Michigan in Champaign-Urbana. Their explanation was this, that if you look at the particular murders that happen, it's not murders that are, you might say, instrumental. It's not murders during a robbery. It's murders between people who know each other. People get into fights over the smallest things, and they escalate to murder. And that's the excess. That's where the extra murders come from. They did various ingenious experiments and collected various ingenious data. In one case, the people were invited into the subject room at the University of Illinois, and there was a Confederate with a file drawer that he had to move to let the subject get through to the lab, and he did. And as the subject passed, he kind of bumped the subject, and he said, "Asshole." He got arbitrarily mad at this person. And so whatever they said was the purpose of the experiment, the real purpose was to give these people projective tests, to look for anger. They tested their saliva for higher levels of cortisol and testosterone, indicating stress or readiness to fight. And they found them in the southern students. I mean, they had a university that was just at the edge, and many students from the south and many from the north. They had people watching the event, judging whether the person reacted with amusement or whether they reacted with anger. And the people judging it were, of course, ignorant of who was from the south and who was of the north, but it strongly came through that the southerners reacted with anger. So this culture of this honor culture hangs on. Where did it come from in the first place? As I say, the southern people were settled with the northern people were settled with Puritans, with Germans, with English, and so on. Immigrants who were farmers, or maybe in commerce. The others were settled with had a herding background, the Scotch-Irish. And the theory, which they accept, and it seems quite convincing to me, at least to explain many instances of honor, is that a herder can have his livelihood stolen overnight. And if there's a weak system of law and there's nothing you can do about it, all you can do is develop a culture in which it doesn't matter if it does me no good. I'll get you for what you did to me. This hypersensitivity to insults, this culture of vengeance. And so this culture is hung on, even though, of course, these people generally don't herd now, it's hung all over the years, which is an interesting puzzle. And some of the latest research echoes what Deborah Prentice said in her talk a few weeks ago here. Her interest was students who were consuming too much alcohol. And one thing she found is the students all felt that everyone else was more tolerant of alcohol consumption than they were. They were increasing their consumption to go along with everyone else who was also increasing their consumption to go along with them. I mean, this is a bit of an exaggeration. There were some wild and crazy students here at Princeton where her experiments were done. But basically, this is the mechanism. And it seems to hold also for this. If you ask people, Southerners, what would you do in this situation? What do you think everyone else would do? The second answer tends to be more aggressive. And so it's an interesting idea how an honor culture can hang on after its roots have disappeared. Concern with U.S. credibility, will, and resolve. Maybe I should, since I'm going to have to go backward through my slides, since this slide should be first and it was last, maybe I should start at the bottom and work up. September 11th is a challenge. I would say this is good. Okay, definitely don't want to go over. September 11th is a challenge, and the Iraq War is an answer. It was a symbolic challenge. It was to the two most important cities, I think you'd have to say, in the United States. It was a challenge with a symbol of a military attack, planes bombing in a symbolic way. What did people do in response to this challenge? I think to a large extent they turned to each other and assured each other, as you would in an honor culture, of their fealty to the group. And so you found bumper stickers like, "These colors don't run," or "Remember September 11th." My colleague Michael Shea, who's also a game theorist, got on his bicycle and went around his electoral district in Santa Monica with his GPS system. And for each point marked whether there was a display on the house, some flag or some sticker or something like that at that point. And he had a very interesting and deep question he was asking. I won't go into it here. Basically, I think that you could state that people were almost having conversations with each other. And here's what he found. This is his data, basically. What a guy. The red are houses with displays, and the black are houses without displays. And so people are not talking to Osama bin Laden. They're talking to each other in this district in Santa Monica. And here it is. This is it. This little yellow piece here is what you just saw in that last slide. And then think of all of Los Angeles, and think of all of the country. And all over the country, these little red dots could be put. People either on their lapel or on the aerial of their car, or something like that, expressing their solidarity and the reassuring each other after this event. Now, I've made a much stronger claim here that somehow the Iraq War was a response. It's not something I think you can really prove. I've talked to people. You get a feeling for why people are doing things, and they may not say it's. I can imagine people disagreeing, me agreeing to disagree with other people on this. But it seems to me that at some important level, the fact that September 11th happened on our watch means we have to do something about it. And that something was maybe the wrong person at the wrong time, or maybe, depending on your view, the right person, just maybe for the wrong reasons. But I do see it as a response to September 11th. Another manifestation is concern with presidential character. And I would say that character does not mean, when it's used in an American election, you don't go through the 10 Commandments and see how each the person does against them, or you don't go through the deadly sins and see how many the person has committed. Character means, will this person stand up, or is this person a flip-flopper? And the way you show that you'll stand up is by having a military record. But a mortal sin is to lie about your military record, in the same way that to pretend to be a gentleman was challengeable and that was doable. And so this was a failed attempt to claim a character, I see. This is a byword in public relations, so-called Dukakis in a tank. It didn't go over. It didn't fit with him. When John Kerry was running, each had accusations of false claims to character. Bush, the claim was that he used his influence to get a cushy position in the National Guard in Texas, then missed most of the appointments. And of course, when this claim was made in CBS News, it was electric. And it may, depending on who you are, where you are in American society, you may take it more or less seriously. Many people took it very seriously, and of course it became a large reason for the resignation of Dan Rather from CBS News, this under-documented report about George Bush's war record. And of course, Kerry's, if you look at the Swift boat advertisements that accused Kerry of lying about his war record, then undermining the troops in Vietnam by testifying in front of the Senate against Vietnam involvement, claiming American torture in Vietnam, a strong motif of honor. And I'll say one last thing in this list. That's this notion of new words for this old word honor. I see new words as credibility and resolve, will. This is the Kissinger Commission claiming action is needed basically in Nicaragua. Our credibility is engaged worldwide by this. The triumph of hostile forces would be read as a sign of U.S. impotence. Many, many quotes of this kind. What bothers me about these quotes is that credibility for what? Is it credibility for always doing what you say you will? Well, no country could claim such a credibility. There's some things some credibility statements are made as points of honor and some aren't. And so the elliptical nature of words like credibility and resolve to do what? Parallel in my mind the elliptical nature of honor being a desire to be seen as honorable. And this is a striking quote at the bottom, I think. It's a speech that was never given, and it has to do with Ted Sorensen preparing a speech for Kennedy to give when he attacked Cuba. This morning I reluctantly ordered the forces to destroy the nuclear buildup in Cuba. There was two reasons for this, both to remove the immediate offensive threat to Americas and to make crystal clear to the Soviet Union that the United States means what it says. On first glance it seems reasonable. On second glance it's very odd to me. Why would someone at the brink of nuclear war be concerned about proving a basically untenable claim that we always do what we say? How many treaties have been broken and so on? But somehow at this point you stand up and your credibility, at least in these matters, is on the line. So these are some, I'll conclude now, and I'll just say that this is a true statement, I believe. Thomas Friedman, writing in the New York Times in 2003, if I've learned one thing covering world affairs, it's this: the single most underappreciated force in international relations is humiliation. And so I don't equate humiliation with the consequence of an assault on one's honor, But I think they're close, and I think that the more we understand the honor of ourselves and of other countries, the more we'll be able to resolve these kinds of conflicts and avoid unnecessary ones. So I guess we help. Thank you.